Crime is an issue throughout the nation. It impacts different places and people in various ways. How one perceives this crime greatly impacts the overall message towards reducing and deterring said crime. With these perceptions come an everlasting fear that takes a toll on justice programs within the community and nation. These two, perceptions and fear, drive the nation to turn to resolutions that can only come with change. First, it is important to note the differences in actual versus perceived fear. All fear is a perception of what we see in the world. Perceived fear is what influences said fear. Many factors come into play with this. According to Gary Lafree, American attitudes are disconnected from reality on crime trends. What explains the seeming disconnect between perception and reality when it comes to crime, the media no doubt play an important role." End quote. We see this when it comes to social media and news sites impacting what we see with crime and if it is in fact true and factual. Moreover, Lafree says that there are important caveats in crime to remember how public perceptions are driven by compelling stories and graphic images. First, the disconnect between public perceptions of crime and actual crime rates is not universal. As explained in the example, between 1993 and 2002, Americans believed that there was more crime in a certain area when in fact there was actually less, showing the disconnect between media and our actual perceived notion of crime. In Lafree's second point, he says, second, there are large geographic variations in crime rates. While crime trends for the country as a whole have been steeply down since the 1990s, and while this decline has included large as well as small cities, there is a good deal of variation. What he is saying is that we do not always get the whole picture of what is happening in other states. Different demographics experience different crime rates, so what we see is a perception of what we are told and given by different media outlets and even our own perceptions. The last point Lafree makes in justifying our perception of crime states, and finally, many crimes are not reported to the police. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, only about half of all violent crime and a third of property crime was reported to the police in 2015. This therefore goes back to the idea that we are fed compelling stories and graphic images by media outlets, therefore swaying how we perceive crime within our community and outside of it versus what actually happens. Besides the media, it is also important to look at other factors such as the state of our nation and how politics play into our perceptions on crime. For example, law and order has been key talking points in looking into who should lead the country, and so on. But overall, no matter what influences our views, it is important to understand actual and perceived crime as they happen and to push aside all preconceived ideas before we conclude on the issues at hand. Next, the fear of crime has many impacts on criminal justice programs. In Gary Cordner's article, Reducing Fear of Crime, we see just what impact fear has on the community. As discussed, fear is a key quality of life issue for many people. Research also indicates that concern about crime has had consequences for the neighborhoods in which we live, end quote. And the other quote, fear leads to withdrawal from public life and it undermines informal and organized efforts by the community to control crime and delinquency. It is difficult to organize activities in neighborhoods where people fear their own neighbors. What Cordner is trying to say is that we are letting our fear control our lives to the point of not even trusting our own neighbors and allowing law enforcement to do their job within the community. This fear is perceived crime, and quote, this makes it different from actual crime, which tends to be concentrated on particular areas, victims, and committed by a small number of offenders. So basically, we are creating a false reality based on what we are fed through media outlets. The impact it has on criminal justice programs show that when individuals invest in burglar alarms or private security guards, rather than spending more on public police forces, they may make themselves safer but leave others worse off because crime is deflected onto others, end quote. And, quote, to the extent that the police thought about managing citizens' individual responses to crime, they visualized a relationship in which citizens detected crime and mobilized the police to deal with it, not one in which the citizens played an important crime control role. These quotes, taken directly from Policing and the Fear of Crime, shows that the community relationship needed to build trust with the police is gone due to crime being concentrated and deflected to certain areas. The main goal of these programs are to detect and mobilize police officers to deal with crime and not allow citizens to be driven by their fear and act as they wish. Programs that local authorities create are there to ensure no crime occurs, but due to this fear, certain areas are highly concentrated with crime and therefore need more attention. In summary, there are many reasons we have perceived crime notions opposed to what actually happens. This is based off of what the news, social media, or your own beliefs lead you to believe. These lead to fear, which hinder the actions of law enforcement and criminal justice programs, where aid cannot be rendered and it destroys the lives of those who need it the most. Overall, there are many reasons we have perceived ideas about crime and crime rates. Whether it be the accuracy of the reporting of certain crimes and the such, it all leads to one thing: fear. Fear that drives people to make rash decisions and hinders law enforcement and any other program from aid and deterring crime from the community. Having said, these are important to understand as fear is costly to a community that thrives off of crime.